Hi, this is Don Forsyth. We've been discussing groups, and most recently talking about how groups can function so effectively. They can be very productive. They can make excellent decisions. They can function as a close-knit team and achieve goals that no single individual can achieve. And yet sometimes groups experience conflict, which disrupts their capacity to be productive, to make excellent decisions, to even remain as a group in order to survive. Even the most serene of groups, the close-knit family, for example, may experience periods of conflict. Take, for example, the group that Steve Jobs and John Scully were part of at Apple Computer Company. They were both executives there. They came to strong differences of opinion about how that company should be led, the direction it should follow, and as a result, conflict occurred, which was resolved in time, but not before their friendship ended. I'd like to talk briefly about a conflict, identify some of the causes, the factors that lead it to escalate, and also how it can be resolved. Generally, conflict begins during routine interaction, when groups are working together, members are working together effectively, making decisions, generating their product, getting along on a day-to-day basis, but something happens, a disagreement, discord, friction, that are actions and beliefs of one or more members of the group are found to be unacceptable to and are therefore resisted by other members of the group. When that occurs, conflict is the result, which often escalates before it then de-escalates. There are, of course, countless causes of conflict within groups, but I organize them into these 5 categories based on these questions. Winning and losing, who has won, who has lost, who gets what, and how can those resources be distributed fairly, who's in charge. Oftentimes power struggles cause conflict. How should things be decided within the group? How can we work together effectively? And in some cases, conflict simply results because people don't like something about other people. So in that case, it's rooted in personal differences rather than interpersonal ones. Let's start with winning. Oftentimes, the conflict within a group, it results because of competition between the group members. Oftentimes, this process is illustrated with the prisoner's dilemma game, which takes its name from the idea that 2 captured prisoners are interrogated in separate rooms, and they are tempted to cooperate with the police and therefore reduce their sentence. However, by doing so, they have to compete with each other, taking a plea agreement, which will then be used against the other individual. So it's a mixed motive situation in the sense they are motivated to cooperate, but they're also motivated to compete at the same time. When researchers examine this mixed motive situation, this tendency to cooperate or compete, they generally find that individuals will compete more dependent upon situational cues that are present. If, for example, the game is referred to as the Wall Street simulation, people are more competitive than if it's called a community game. If the other individual who's part of who they're paired with is described as an opponent, they tend to be more competitive rather than cooperative. In iterated games, in other words, they don't play the prisoner's dilemma game. They don't make these choices once, but they make them over and over again. Generally, cooperation tends to increase over time. So particularly reciprocity increases over time. So if you tend to be paired with a competitive person, you're more likely to compete over time. But if you're paired with a cooperative one, you're also more likely to engage in reciprocity and become cooperative yourself. The amount of money has apparently little influence on cooperation and competition in the prisoner's dilemma game, even when the stakes are quite high. You tend to find that people compete frequently, as well as cooperate. Sex differences are quite mixed, although in some cases it suggests that women are somewhat more competitive than men. Deutsch, in his analysis of cooperation and competition, his basic conclusion is that classrooms which are based upon competition between students for good grades are breeding grounds for conflict, and that in fact classrooms should be cooperatively organized rather than competitively organized. Other research suggests there are individual differences in tendency to cooperate or compete in social settings. Some people are individualists. They're really concerned with their own outcomes, and they don't pay much attention to the outcomes of other individuals. Competitors, on the other hand, are actively interested in minimizing others' outcomes while maximizing their own. Cooperators have an eye both on their own outcomes but also on others, trying to enhance both. And altruists are willing to take a personal loss. They're willing to sacrifice their own outcomes for the good of others. So those are the four constellations of social value orientations. Beyond winning and losing, we have issues of sharing. Oftentimes, groups generate outcomes. They share resources. The question is, how will those resources be divided within the group? A commons dilemma occurs, or sometimes referred to as a social trap, in which there are shared resources, but certain individuals can take more, group members can take more than their fair share, and therefore possibly deplete this shared resource. Public goods occur when individuals don't contribute their fair share to a collective. Fairness dilemmas occur when individuals are uncertain as to whether or not they got their fair share. Procedural justice means that the norms that are recognized as fair ones to follow in the distribution of resources perhaps have been violated. Distributed justice occurs when people simply don't feel as though they've received enough, and others have gotten more. Responsibility dilemmas are common in groups. It means that certain individuals feel that they're more responsible for outcomes, particularly positive outcomes, and they feel that they're not responsible for negative outcomes, and they're more likely to blame others in such circumstances. A third cause beyond winning and losing, competition, and sharing dilemmas is controlling. Oftentimes, members strive to be dominant within their groups. There's only certain individuals can lead a group, so the dominance hierarchy forms sometimes, and as that hierarchy comes into existence and forms, conflict as is the result, as one member tries to influence others and require that others accept their influence. Morrill, in his analysis of corporate groups, found that they are rife with this kind of conflict, where individuals were trying to control other individuals, gain a position as the alpha males and females in the dominance hierarchy. Groups, as they work together on tasks, often experience conflict. Task conflict might just be an honest disagreement of opinion on the nature of the work to be done. In fact, it may be the job of the group members to engage in task conflict so they can just disagree over issues and reach a better decisions. Robert's Rules of Order, in fact, Roberts generated his rules of order so that groups could deal with task conflict effectively, that it wouldn't spill over into personal conflict where individuals end up disliking each other. Process conflict is a very specific kind of conflict where the group is not sure how the decision should be made. So it could be, for example, the group must reach a decision on some particular point, and they may decide to vote on it, but the actual logistics of the voting process are not worked out, and members disagree about how to vote in particular. In general, it does look like task conflict and process conflict and personal conflict results in is negative for the most part. Although the ideal would be that task conflict has far fewer negative repercussions for the group than personal conflict. Personal conflict is the final source, where people just simply don't like each other. Uh, any factor which contributes to attraction within the group, we tend to like similar others, for example. We like individuals whose values match our own. We like individuals who reciprocate kindness towards us. We like people who compliment us. Um, Individuals who don't do any of those things, we tend to not like so much, and that can result in conflict. It is the case that liking conflict with another individual, an individual we dislike, yields the highest level of hostility. Although tension is often created when we find ourselves in conflict with somebody we like very much, hostility overall is greatest when we are in conflict, disagreement with a person who we dislike as well. The 5 causes of conflict: winning, sharing, controlling, working, and liking. We'll turn in our next presentation to factors that lead to increases in conflict, escalation, and also factors that can lead to reduction in conflict. Thank you as always for joining me. This is Don Forsythe.